Hi, this is Matt Darst. Jade and I usually share the Parking Live mic. Today, she's allowed me to borrow it. I'm turning the tables on my co-host, joined by Hannah Fuller, to talk about something this industry has been circling for years without quite landing on it. What it actually means to give women in parking a real path forward, something more than a pledge. Jade is the strategic marketing leader in charge of content and commercial strategy for Trellent, and Hannah is the director of commercial strategy and partnerships at Unity 5. Both of my guests have been and continue to be heavily involved in BPA and women in parking. And that last part is important to note, as this is a women in parking episode. It's about what it actually takes to give women in this industry not just a seat, but a real shot. And as you'll hear, sponsorship over mentorship. And the kind of leadership that shows up long after International Women's Day is off the calendar. We had such a good, informative discussion, we decided to actually break this into two parts. So let's jump into part one. Welcome, Hannah. Welcome, Jade. Thanks for joining Parking Live today.
Likewise. Great to be here.
Oh, thanks for having me, Matt.
The hunter is the huntee today, Jade.
Yeah, I know. The shoe's on the other foot. Yeah, for sure. But, I'm in safe hands. I know I'm in safe hands. I'm good.
Well, let's jump right into it. A lot of organizations talk about mentorship, and far fewer, though, really practice sponsorship. And can you provide your thoughts on that? What's the difference and why does it matter?
Jade, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I'll go for it. For me, mentorship is advice and sponsorship's more about action. A mentor might help you prepare, get yourself ready for a particular role, but a sponsor really puts their name next to yours when it counts. They're that person in the room that you're not in, championing you. So there's a difference between the two. And I think with sponsorship, the progress stays almost theoretical. It's there as a backup, as a second pair of hands, second pair of eyes to give you that boost that you may need.
And I think the key word's championing, isn't it, Jade?
Oh, yeah.
I think one of the things is you can never have too many sponsors, but you can probably have too many mentors. You can never have too many people that are fighting your corner. And actually, one of the nice things I think is that sometimes you get mutual sponsorship. So you get people who you sponsor and they sponsor you because it's not always in the same space. And I kind of like that about sponsorship. The other thing I think about mentorship is actually it's great, but it's hard to find and sometimes it's quite hard to deliver. Whereas actually sponsorship, I think, can be different. I think mentorship is sometimes about being accessible and available, whereas sponsorship is about representation and that championing that you mentioned, Jade. So for me, that's why we should talk more about sponsorship.
I found that no matter who I speak to, everyone in this industry has been able to point to someone who's inspired them or maybe sponsored them, to your point. Personally, I was fortunate to work for three women early on in my career, Pat Bryant, Kathy Murray, B. Raina Hickey, who provided really exemplary leadership and encouragement. And I want to just ask you, who backed you early on? Can we give them a shout out? Not just to help you advance, but that genuine sponsorship that you noted.
Do you know what? For me, and it sounds really stupid, for me, my sponsor was male. My sponsor was a guy right at the beginning of my career in the parking world. And actually, he's not in parking anymore, but it was a guy called Kevin Bird. And the reason he was a sponsor was because he understood the value I brought. He took time to understand my value and he took time to realize where I should sit in each conversation. And I think once he knew that, he knew exactly where to bring me in, exactly where he backed off, and exactly where to say, do you know what, I'm not, as much as he was the UK lead at that particular point, he was like, actually, Hannah's the best person here. And he did that in so many occasions and he brought me into so many conversations, which by my seniority, I had no right to be in. But because he took me in, I was there. And that for me was amazing.
Oh, brilliant.
So thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, and I had a couple and they came much later on in my career. So I would say that, and they were both male actually. So Nigel Williams surprisingly enough, was probably one of the first people to say to me that my experience as an operator, like from the ground up, was extremely valuable. And again, like Hannah said, in conversations where I wouldn't normally be in the room, it was the missing piece of that kind of puzzle where you would have board meetings and council meetings and meetings about various different high-level strategic strategies that you would not be thinking about what is happening on the ground necessarily. And that input is so, so important. And he was one of the first people that made me feel valued in that sense, to say that, okay, actually, no, I do deserve to be in these rooms. I should be in these rooms. And I'm adding something to it, which gave me more confidence. And the other one was, is Philip Hammer, actually. He pushed me to get involved in things that, I didn't feel like I had a place to get involved in. And that's a mixture between my own confidence and the fact that I was never asked to be in those rooms or exposed to those rooms in the first place. So both of those two chaps really did kind of push me out of my comfort zone in terms of what I felt was achievable within my own exposure. And from that, my career accelerated massively. So yeah, I owe a lot to them.
And you've apparently both run with it. What I think is amazing is your work has had such a ripple effect and has really started to inspire women in parking groups and communities across Europe and Australia. When you take a look at what you've built and what you've done, what does it tell you about the demand for this type of work in this space and the responsibility that comes with inspiring, sponsoring others beyond your market?
I think this is a real pinch me moment for us, wasn't it, Hannah? The idea that something that we took on and created to be this network and a space for women to go to connect with each other ended up growing so much. And I think it told us there was a need. It was always a need for it to be there. We just didn't have almost the permission or the proof to say that it belonged, And given a little bit of history of women in parking in the UK, Hannah and I had been in the industry for quite some years and had no exposure to any network like this. One didn't exist within our time in the industry, but preceding us, it had existed. There was a Women in Parking group, probably disbanded about 10 years or so before we set up the Women in Parking that we know today for the UK. And, it's also very successful in the US too. So it wasn't a new thing that we were doing, but the way we did it a different way. And I think the authenticity behind it and the model that we've created just by trying to do something good, I think it's just humbling for us to see it grow so far. And it's been fantastic to be part of.
I think part of it is about the community as well. And I think that's why it has that ripple effect. And that's why it's been able to cross borders and become a replicated community, is because actually there's people who've joined us from different communities, from different countries. They've come in, they've seen the value, they've looked at the stuff we do, and they want to go and replicate that in their market. And that's, for us, I think that's amazing. I think for me, there have been a couple of things. When the European Parking Association created their Women in Parking group, they invited us to go and launch it. So I was really fortunate. I was able to go out to Brussels and launch that at their conference. And that was amazing. And I stood in front of a group of people I've never met before. And I saw synergies, and I saw energy, and I saw collaboration, and it's all of those things that make community great. So that for me was amazing. And I think then the nice thing that it's not just market related. All of a sudden we're seeing these women in groups kind of rock up in larger organizations and some medium-sized, smaller organizations. But there's this kind of, actually, this community has created a space that I feel like I can learn, grow, be comfortable, collaborate, communicate within. Why can't I do that within my own organization? And I think there are many, many other organizations in parking, but Jade and I were asked to be part of the launch of the Women in Arrive network. And we did a webinar by one of our very good friends and very big supporters in the UK, actually. But that was amazing, because you see that it's a ripple effect across lots of countries, but also across different organizations, which enables people at all levels of organizations to come in. And I think that's super important. And actually, I was able to thank Scott, who championed that earlier this week at Intertraffic, which was really nice, able to meet him in person and thank him for the work that he's actually doing. And again, championing the women in his organisation to stand up and be a community.
Yeah, and seeing it travel in that way as well, across businesses as well as borders, it just reinforces that representation is not a local issue, it's a structural issue. And it's something that we have the responsibility as businesses, just as much as we do as a sector, to make sure that we are sharing the work that's being done. We're being honest about what works and what doesn't work. And we make space for others to adapt to their own context rather than copy and paste a model from one to the next. You know, the women in Australia, the women in parking in Australia and the European Women in Parking group, they're not copy and pastes of the women in parking in the UK. They've got the space and the model to create their own structure, their own network, and they're grabbing it by the horns and they're doing fantastic work.
I mean, that's a fantastic segue into my next question. You're talking about crossing borders and industries and markets. If we get a little bit more introspective with it, maybe you could talk about the invisible barriers that you see within the industry, the patterns that typically hold women back.
I love this piece, don't I, Jade? Jade knows that this is the bit that I look at our industry, and we did some research. Oh God, it must be 5 years ago, Jade, that we did the research that actually says there's an equal number of women and men in our industry. The problem is when it comes to leadership, and there's all these barriers that stop women from being in those positions, and they are not physical barriers. Sometimes they're barriers due to policies. Often they're barriers due to policies or championed or actually confidence. I think that's huge. And being able to say, do you know what, this is what I bring, and being able to be honest enough and get the people around you who will support you and who will champion you. I think there is a tendency for women often to be very humble about the work that they do. And in being humble about the work they do, they often don't get recognized. And I don't think it's that someone doesn't want to recognize them. It's just that they're not putting their hand up and saying, hey, I did this. And that for me is one of the things that we have to keep pushing through. We have to keep putting women in positions where they can be seen, where they can talk about the great work that they're doing. And that's in the industry, but also within our own organizations, and actually giving credit and giving opportunities. And that's where those barriers, I think we have a real opportunity to break them down.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, where I was thinking was access and attribution. So most of the time when we're working as women, we're doing it without the visibility, or we're delivering outcomes without owning the narrative. And I think that happens so much in the background that we're not getting that kind of forward-focused visibility where we're being seen for the achievements. And adding who gets informal feedback, right, versus formal criticism. You know, it's easy to label a woman difficult for enforcing standards. And that does happen. It's one of those cultural challenges that we face. And those patterns compound really quickly and have a knock-on effect when it comes to confidence and stepping up and speaking up, really. So I think, as leaders and as businesses, as a sector, that's where that sponsorship really comes into play.
How many times, Jade, have we had that come up where someone said, I'm burning out, or I'm drowning, or I'm really struggling, and the community they just need someone to say, because they don't want to say it to their boss. They need someone to tell that they're struggling. And then you don't have to be perfect, because we think we have to be perfect sometimes. I think you don't have to be perfect. Like, give yourself a break. You can do 80% of a job and it's done. You don't have to do 100% every time. I think that's such a big thing about having those standards and going across and above those standards.
I think too often equity comes across as a mission statement and less as something that can be quantified. And I'd really like to get your thoughts on how we move from theory to practice. How do we ensure that the right people are getting in front of clients, or are getting the credit for a win, or get the high profile accounts?
Oh, it's such a hard one, isn't it, Jade?
Yeah, it is. But I think it needs to stem from leadership. I think that needs to be a top-down approach in terms of, change how you reward achievement. And if advancement then depends on visibility, the visibility must be shared intentionally. So that's got to have a part to play. I think we take visibility for granted. There's a lot of value and weight in visibility. If you get that win, that person should be seen as getting that win and should be at the forefront of, receiving those achievements. And I think how we reward performance and how we reward career progression, how we develop people, I think, visibility should be a part of that we should take on board too. And I think that's just as much about making sure that the opportunity to get it is shared just as well as it is actually doing it. That's my perspective.
And having strong role models, there's got to be someone who you have to be able to look up and say, this is possible. I think that's really important. I think it's important that we instill in our hires, in the graduates that are coming into programs, that actually there's people that they can look up to, that they can sit alongside, that they can learn from within businesses and be given opportunities. Jade and I we both feel like we were given opportunities along the way to show that we were really good at what we do. And that's such a huge thing. And we need to make sure that actually there's time to do that kind of thing in people's days. We bake that into our organizations. We bake in time to support, train, mentor, sponsor.
Yeah, and those opportunities need to be shared out equally as well. I've had conversations in the past where we've had frontline officers say that they weren't senior enough to go to a parking show, a conference, when that kind of level of exposure opens perspective and, you'll learn a lot from those kind of things. And also they've got a lot to give. And it's that kind of opportunity that we should be making sure is dished out evenly for people. So, and also backing publicly. So if somebody's made a decision and it's right, even if it's not a popular one, give them the kudos to say, you've done well. This is because of that person's done this. That doesn't happen enough, I don't think. And it would be great to see that happen more often.
Hannah, I think a theme that you picked up on and one that Jade really dovetailed into is give to gain, which is one of the themes of International Women's Day. And if we apply give to gain as a leadership standard, what concrete actions could someone realistically take, say, in the next 30 days to start making a difference?
So I have some really strong feelings about this one, actually. I really like give to gain. I think we should do more of it. So many people are fortunate and we should give back. We should give back more. I think for me, thank the people that should be thanked. And that doesn't necessarily mean your team. I can say thank you to my team and they know that I mean it. But if I say thank you to someone who has just done a great job, or I can see that they're trying, or actually even my boss that supported me and gave me an opportunity, if we can thank someone, remember to do that, because it means so much and it gives people the opportunity. It gives you a proud moment. Someone said thank you, great. And it gives you that boost. Give someone an opportunity. If you do something and you do it every day and you do it well, how easy is it just to carry on doing it? Oh my God, it's so easy. But if you give someone else that opportunity, A, they can take away a job that you have to do and free up a bit of your time to do something new. But B, they're learning something new. They've got someone who can support them. You're giving them an opportunity. Probably the third one, which I guess is a little thing, but is as a leader, learning about skills of other people in the business is so important. So I could go to someone in my team every day of the week. I know what their skill sets are. I know what they're great at. But actually, if I keep it to my team, I'm going to enable my team to always do those things. If I can actually understand where someone else has value, I can give something to someone else outside of my team. I guess it ties into the above too. It gives them a great boost, but it also gives them another opportunity. So learning about other people's skill sets I think is a really important thing in that giving to gain playbook.
I love the give to gain theme as well. And it has to live well beyond one theme for International Women's Day. It should be ingrained in what we do and what we're trying to achieve, right? And not just with the Women in Parking group, but throughout our businesses. I think this is just a great way to be. And, for me, the three things that I would consider for the next 30 days to be realistic I mean, I do think exposure's gold dust. And I don't just mean exposure as in, put someone on a pedestal or a stage and put them in the limelight, because that doesn't always suit everybody. But exposure to experience and conversations and new things, I would definitely say audit who's getting exposure and make sure it's balanced. And so you're not kind of getting pockets of people, but are getting all the exposure and nobody else is getting that opportunity to do it, because there will be people that will want to develop in different ways. So that would be one of them for me. Sponsor somebody. Sponsor one person for a concrete opportunity, and don't just make it advice. Be that champion for them in the room that they're not in. I really recommend that, somebody find somebody to do that for. And 3, remove at least one unnecessary barrier from a process that disproportionately slows somebody down, right? There is always one somewhere that's going to slow someone down. I mean, we had a great conversation in one of our Women in Parking panels for ParkX about women's safety. And women's safety is such a big topic, especially within transportation. One of the conversations was that a particular business decided to rethink their travel policy and their expenses policy, because their plan was, and what their policy stated was, you have to go to the cheapest hotel, right? And you have a bracket of how much you can spend. And when you've got an event that's in a city, for example, where most of the time the hotels are going to be extortionate, they're going to be outside of that price bracket, you're pushing somebody to go further out away from that venue, which is increasing the security risk and also confidence. So somebody like a lone female traveling late at night after an event might not want to then get on public transport by herself and get from A to B or get in a taxi. So that's a barrier for somebody. It's a barrier that doesn't necessarily need to be there. And that was a great example, because after our panel session, this particular person come up to us and went, I am going to change my travel policy based on this conversation, because it's limiting women within my team getting to events because I'm creating that barrier for them. That was a simple change.
Well, that's all for this part 1 episode of Parking Live. A huge thank you to Jade and Hannah for a conversation that was as practical as it was inspiring. From sponsorship over mentorship to communities being built across several continents, and to trusting your gut and finding your people. If this one resonated with you, share it with someone in your network who needs to hear it. And be sure to come back for part 2 of this episode.
Thank you for listening. I'm Julie Gates, executive producer of Parking Live. This episode was created by hosts and producers Jade Neville and Matt Darst, producer Chris O'Keefe, editor Patrick Emile, and associate producer Cyndi Raskin. Parking Live is brought to you by Modaxo, passionate about moving the world's people. You can follow us on LinkedIn, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and visit us online at parking-live.com. Thanks for joining us at Parking Live, where the curb meets the conversation.